first time Ilara noticed him, he was sitting alone at the corner table of Nebula 9, a quiet interspecies cafe orbiting the blue gas giant Kepri. His suit was human-cut, dark and precise, out of place among the flowing fabrics and glowing skins of the alien patrons. Ilara adjusted her tray and approached, her bioluminescent freckles dimmed to a professional calm, and asked what he would like to drink. He looked up with eyes that carried exhaustion and resolve in equal measure, and ordered plain water, a strange choice in a place known for stellar nectars. When she returned with the glass, he thanked her with a soft smile, one that did not linger but felt sincere, and something about that unsettled her more than arrogance ever could. Over the next hour he remained, reviewing holographic documents, occasionally glancing around as if weighing invisible options. Ilara served other tables, yet found her attention drawn back to him, until at last he stood and requested the bill. As she processed the payment, he paused, then asked her name. Ilara of Lyris, she replied, tilting her head slightly, unused to humans asking such things. My name is Adrian Cole, he said, CEO of Cole Stellar Industries. Then, as if that explained nothing and everything at once, he added, I have an unusual proposal. Would you be willing to hear it? She hesitated, then nodded, and that was when he asked, would you be my wife for a single day? The words hung between them like a gravity well. Ilara blinked, her translator implant fluttering to confirm accuracy. She laughed once, softly, assuming humor, but his expression remained steady, earnest. I am serious, he said. I will explain, and if you refuse, I will walk away without complaint. Curiosity overcame caution, and Ilara gestured to an empty booth, unaware that her life had just tilted onto a new orbit. Adrian explained that the Interstellar Trade Council required a ceremonial union to finalize a merger with a matriarchal alien consortium. Human law allowed proxies, but alien tradition demanded a living spouse present. One day only, no deception beyond ceremony, complete discretion, and compensation beyond generous. Ilara listened, her antennae shifting colors with each detail. This was absurd, dangerous, and yet strangely respectful. He spoke not of ownership or advantage, but of partnership, however temporary. I chose you because you looked at me like I was just another being ordering water, he said, not a title, not a fortune. She considered her life, the long shifts, the quiet dreams of seeing more than a cafe window framing the stars. A single day could change nothing or everything, and she set conditions, mutual respect, cultural observance of her people, and freedom to walk away afterward without pursuit. Adrian agreed without hesitation and drafted a contract on the spot, readable in both species' legal codes. When she signed, her name glowed briefly, sealing the pact. Preparations moved swiftly. Ilara was fitted for ceremonial attire, blending human elegance and Lyrisian lightweave. Adrian coached her on the council's expectations, but also asked about her world, her family, her favorite songs, listening as though time itself had slowed. By the night before the ceremony, Ilara felt an unfamiliar warmth beside him, not romance, not yet, but trust, a fragile bridge spanning species and circumstance. The council chamber shimmered with authority, delegates of 100 worlds observing as Adrian and Ilara entered together, hands linked by custom. Her skin glowed in patterns of courage. His posture was calm and grounded. They spoke vows crafted for neutrality, promises of cooperation, shared witness, and mutual honor. Yet as they repeated the words, Ilara felt them resonate deeper than scripted lines. Adrian met her gaze, not as a CEO, but as a man choosing presence over power. After the ceremony, negotiations flowed smoothly. The consortium approved the merger. Citing the harmony displayed, cameras flashed, history recorded a footnote of unity. Later, away from the crowds, they shared a meal overlooking the stars, no aides, no translators, just two voices learning each other's rhythms. Ilara laughed freely. Adrian admitted fears he had never voiced, about legacy, loneliness, and the cost of ambition. For one day, they were not roles but people, and the universe seemed kinder for it. At dawn, the agreement expired, they stood at the docking bay where paths diverged. Adrian offered her a transfer chit, education, travel, anything promised. Ilara accepted only a small portion, enough to explore on her own terms, and thanked him for honesty, for seeing her, not the convenience she represented. "I will not ask for more," Adrian said, though his voice betrayed the wish. "Nor will I forget," Ilara replied, touching his hand in farewell. The ship doors closed, and space reclaimed its silence. Months later, Ilara stood on Lyris Prime, watching twin suns rise, her life transformed by choices made freely. Adrian watched a similar sunrise from Earth, the merger successful, his empire expanded, yet something essential remained unfinished. They did not communicate often, but when they did, messages were thoughtful, unhurried, unbound by contracts. One day, Adrian asked if she would like to visit Earth, not as a wife, not for a ceremony, but as Ilara. She smiled, her freckles brightening, and replied that she would. Because sometimes, a single day is not an ending, but an opening. Ilara's journey to Earth began not with ceremony, but with quiet anticipation. The human transport vessel was smaller than interstellar liners, yet filled with subtle comforts. As she watched stars stretch into luminous threads, she reflected on how a single choice had widened her universe, not through force or fate, but through consent and curiosity. Earth emerged beneath her as a swirl of oceans and clouds, vibrant and alive, and when the ship descended through atmosphere, Ilara felt gravity embrace her differently, heavier yet grounding, as if the planet itself expected honesty from all who walked its surface. Adrian waited at the arrival terminal without entourage or cameras, dressed simply, hands clasped behind his back. When their eyes met, there was no rush forward, no rehearsed greeting, only recognition, like two travelers meeting again at a familiar crossroads. "Welcome to Earth," he said, his voice steady, warm. "Thank you for inviting me as myself," Ilara replied, her translator softening the music of her words. They spent the first days exploring cities and quiet places alike. Adrian showed her parks where humans escaped ambition, museums where history confessed its mistakes, and coastlines where the planet breathed endlessly. Ilara shared stories of Lyris Prime, of songs sung in light and silence, of communities bound by shared memory rather than wealth. At night they talked, not about mergers or councils, but about choices. Ilara spoke of the fear of becoming defined by one extraordinary event. Adrian admitted his struggle to step out from the shadow of his own name. Each conversation stitched another thread of understanding between them. One evening, as rain traced silver lines across the window, Adrian asked if she regretted agreeing to the one-day marriage. Ilara considered carefully, then shook her head. "I regret nothing that was honest," she said. "I only regret worlds where honesty is rare." He smiled, not triumphantly, but with relief, as if some internal ledger had finally balanced. Time passed gently, without contracts, without deadlines, yet both sensed the unspoken question hovering between them. Unlike the first proposal, this one carried weight beyond convenience, and Adrian struggled with whether to voice it, fearing that power, even unintentional, could taint sincerity. Ilara sensed his hesitation and addressed it first. "You are afraid that asking again would bind me unfairly," she said, "and that tells me more about you than any promise could." They walked along a quiet shoreline at dawn, waves murmuring like patient witnesses. Adrian stopped, turned to her, and spoke with deliberate clarity. "Ilara of Lyris, would you choose to walk beside me, not for a day, not for duty, but because you wish to, with every freedom to leave should the path no longer feel true?" She studied him, not as a billionaire, not as a symbol of another world, but as a being standing unguarded before her, and she felt no pressure, only invitation. "Yes," she answered, softly but firmly, "I choose that." Their union this time was not recorded by councils or markets. It unfolded gradually, through shared homes on two worlds, through misunderstandings navigated with patience, through laughter that bridged biology and culture. Ilara learned the rhythms of Earth. Adrian learned the quiet eloquence of Lyrisian light speech. Together, they founded programs connecting service workers across species, honoring dignity in labor. Inspired by where they first met, Nebula 9 became a symbol rather than a memory, a place where titles dissolved into simple exchanges. Years later, when asked by historians how an interstellar alliance truly began, Adrian would speak not of profit margins or strategic marriages, but of a glass of water ordered without pretense. Ilara would add that the universe often listens when beings treat each other as equals, even briefly. And so the story of a single day became legend not because it was temporary, but because it proved that even the smallest honest choice can echo across stars, shaping futures no contract could ever define. The years that followed unfolded with a patience neither of them had known before, not rushed by ambition nor frozen by fear, but paced by mutual consent. Ilara and Adrian learned that love across worlds was not a single bridge, but a constellation of smaller crossings, each requiring attention, humility, and the courage to listen. They chose to live in seasons, months on Earth, where gravity pressed ideas into action, months on Lyris Prime, where light carried meaning and silence spoke volumes. The transitions were not always smooth, yet every departure was met with a return planned together. On Earth, Ilara walked city streets where humans hurried with purpose. She studied governance, ecology, and art, discovering that a planet could be both ancient and restless. She found joy in simple rituals, morning markets, shared meals, the way rain changed conversations. Adrian watched her curiosity soften the sharp edges of his world, reminding him that progress did not require conquest, only care. On Lyris Prime, Adrian learned to read the subtle language of light, to pause before speaking, to value communal memory over individual acclaim. Elders welcomed him cautiously at first, then with growing warmth, as he demonstrated consistency rather than promises. He worked alongside artisans and gardeners, his hands learning what his mind had long neglected. Together they faced misunderstandings born not of malice, but of difference, debates over privacy and publicity, over the pace of decisions, over how much of their story belonged to them alone. Each challenge became a lesson in negotiation without dominance, a practice that quietly reshaped how Adrian led his enterprises and how Ilara engaged with interstellar institutions. Nebula 9, the cafe where their paths first crossed, evolved into a crossroads of its own, supported by their joint foundation. Service workers from dozens of species trained, exchanged cultures, and gained protections previously denied. The cafe's simple menu remained unchanged, a reminder that humility was not a phase, but a principle. When conflicts arose between trade blocs, mediators often cited the Nebula Accords, informal guidelines emphasizing respect, transparency, and voluntary partnership. Few remembered the origin clearly, fewer still realized it began with a waitress and a glass of water. As time deepened their bond, the question of permanence returned, not as urgency, but as reflection. Ilara valued the freedom that defined her people. Adrian respected the sanctity of choice above all else. They understood that vows could be renewed daily through action rather than ceremony. One evening beneath Lyris Prime's triple moons, Adrian spoke of mortality, of the human lifespan's brevity against cosmic scales. Ilara listened, her light patterns soft with empathy. She shared Lyrisian perspectives on legacy, how memory could outlive flesh through stories carried honestly. "We do not measure forever by time," she said, "but by impact." He considered this, finding peace in the idea that their shared moments, however finite, mattered profoundly. They chose a commitment unbound by traditional labels, a partnership chartered by mutual recognition, celebrated privately among friends from many worlds. No council observed, no cameras recorded, yet the meaning was unmistakable. In later years, children came into their lives, not all biological, some adopted from worlds fractured by war or neglect. Their home became a mosaic of languages and laughter, a place where questions were welcomed and answers explored together. Ilara taught them to listen to silence. Adrian taught them to question authority. When asked how they met, they told the story simply, omitting grandeur, emphasizing choice. The children grew up understanding that love was not an accident, but a practice. As the galaxy shifted through eras of uncertainty and renewal, the example of their union persisted quietly, cited in classrooms, whispered in negotiations, a reminder that power could kneel without losing strength, that difference could coexist without erasure. And when, much later, historians compiled the chronicles of interstellar harmony, they wrote not of a billionaire's empire nor an alien's novelty, but of two beings who honored a single day so completely that it taught the stars how to pronounce their names. Time moved differently once their lives settled into shared rhythm, not slower, but fuller, each season layered with intention. Ilara and Adrian discovered that longevity was not merely survival, but the careful tending of meaning, and meaning required renewal. As their children grew, the household shifted from lessons to dialogues. Evenings were spent beneath open skies where constellations from multiple worlds were traced and compared, each star holding a different story depending on who spoke first. The children learned that truth could have many faces without losing its center. Adrian stepped further away from centralized authority, delegating leadership across collectives shaped by trust rather than hierarchy. Shareholders resisted at first, but outcomes spoke louder than fear, productivity rose, conflict diminished, and the idea of ethical restraint became profitable without becoming hollow. Ilara took on a quieter role, mentoring cultural liaisons and historians, ensuring that progress never erased origin. She reminded councils that speed without wisdom was merely another form of collapse. Her presence commanded respect not through volume, but through clarity. Together they refused monuments, no statues, no days of honor. Instead, they funded archives of lived experience, oral histories recorded by workers, migrants, and caretakers across systems, believing that civilization rested on shoulders too often unseen. In their later years, travel slowed, but correspondence flourished. Messages arrived from distant outposts, thanking them for frameworks that allowed cooperation without coercion. Some wrote of lives saved, others of dignity restored. Ilara would read these aloud, Adrian listening with eyes closed, letting gratitude settle without pride. "I never imagined influence could feel this quiet," he once said. "That is how you know it is real," Ilara replied, her light patterns calm and content. When illness eventually came, as it does to all embodied beings, it was met without panic. Adrian faced the limits of his human form with acceptance shaped by Lyrisian philosophy. Ilara faced impending separation with courage grounded in shared memory. They spoke openly, planned gently, and held nothing back. On his final morning, sunlight filtered through leaves, casting familiar shadows. Adrian took Ilara's hand, grateful not for the length of his life, but for its depth. "One day was enough to change everything," he whispered, his voice steady. "One choice was enough," she answered, her glow soft with love. After he passed, Earth mourned quietly, markets barely stirred. For his systems no longer depended on him, on Lyris Prime. Ilara held a remembrance where silence was honored as much as speech. She shared stories with their children, not of loss, but of continuity. Years later, when Ilara herself felt time drawing inward, she returned to Nebula 9, now preserved as a living archive. The cafe still served water in simple glasses. Attendants greeted her without ceremony, recognizing her as one of their own. She sat at the corner table where it began, ordered plain water, and watched beings of countless forms pass through, trading stories, laughter, and quiet respect. She felt no longing, only completion. When her light finally dimmed, it was said that the stars nearest the station pulsed briefly, as if acknowledging a familiar presence. No records confirmed this, but belief persisted. Long after both were gone, the question that started it all entered common language, spoken not as romance, but as philosophy. Would you choose me freely, even briefly, even knowing it may change us both? Students debated it, mediators invoked it, artists painted it in abstract forms, yet its origin remained grounded in humility, a reminder that the universe does not require grand gestures to transform, only honest ones. And so their legacy endured, not as legend carved in stone, but as practice repeated daily, across worlds, in quiet choices made without witnesses, proving again and again that a single day, offered with respect, can teach eternity how to listen.